I don't know about you and how you're feeling at the moment, but I really feel like we're living in strange days. I mean, the situation seems completely weird, doesn't it? And in some ways, I guess it feels like it's a bit of an over-the-top reaction to something. But that's because we're trying to prevent people from catching a disease. We're trying to prevent people from dying. We're trying to do something to head it off at the pass, to protect our NHS and to take care of one another by distancing ourselves and for some socially isolating ourselves. I guess if you've been in your house for a week already, then you're pretty much feeling a little stir crazy. But as you reflect on the situation, I wonder what your reaction is. I wonder what you're thinking in terms of what it is that we're going through. I have to say that it's something that sort of exercised me a lot over the past couple of weeks as I've started to think through how we do church in a different way, what ministry looks like and what community looks like and fellowship and all those sorts of things. Do you know, I was speaking to my sister just a couple of days ago and she said to me, do you know, I know this sounds absolutely crazy, but in some ways it feels like the end of the world. And maybe that's how you're feeling. It was an interesting comment from her and the experiences that she's going through. The thing that's strange about it, I guess, for me, is the fact that we are facing and fighting an invisible foe. There's a truth in that, isn't there? The coronavirus is something that we cannot see. All we get is the impact and the symptoms from those, for many of us, that we've heard about that actually have this particular disease. Something we cannot see is posing a real threat to all around us, including ourselves. And it's for that reason, I guess, that I've chosen the passage this morning and I've asked Mary to read it for us. For at its heart, Paul says, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers and against authorities and against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. He's describing something that is invisible. There's a very real sense that we should all, as Christians, be well placed to face the present threat. Why? Because we are dealing with invisible foes. And that should be, if Paul is right, our stock in trade. Jesus tells us in John chapter 10 and verse 10 that the thief comes only to steal, to kill, and to destroy. Isn't that what this current virus is seeking to do? It's seeking to steal our relationships. It's seeking to destroy our communities. It's seeking to kill our friends, potentially at least. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the coronavirus is evil per se, it's just doing what viruses do. It's the impact that it has upon human bodies that is the potential threat. But what I am saying is that the physical realm is currently mirroring what Paul says is true in the spiritual realm. If we're willing to look, will we see that this threat gives us as Christians glimpses into what is already going on in the spiritual realm around us every single day. Something we ignore too often because we cannot see its impact. We're under attack by one who is always and only and ever trying to steal and kill and destroy. That is his stock in trade. So I guess the question is, how do we respond to invisible foes? And it's that I want to address from the passage that Mary read to us this morning. Firstly, he tells us that we are to stay close and stay strong in verse 10. Let me read it to you. It says this, finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. We live in a world that has in recent years valued independence almost above everything else, certainly above a sense of interdependence. We like to do our own thing, do our own way, at our own time, and at our own convenience. Individualism has overcome, has squashed any sense of community. And if we're going to get through this current crisis, we need to be willing to think of others and place others above ourselves. We are looking to support one another. And just on the radio yesterday, somebody was saying that one of the things that has really encouraged them is the way that out of nowhere a sense of community in people's streets, a sense of community in people's towns has begun to develop as people have begun to offer support and help and a chat and all sorts of other things. And that's only got to be a good thing. Now, if that's true in the physical world, that we need one another, even when we're at a distance, even when we're encouraged to socially isolate, we need that sense of community to have a sense of well-being. How much more so is it true in the spiritual realm? The image that always comes to mind when I read this particular verse is the image of walking down the street late at night. You know, you're a young man, you're a young woman, you're walking down the street late at night, and then just ahead of you, around a corner, comes a group of youths or young people or whoever, Hell's Angels or whoever you might think, but they have ill intent on their minds. You can tell that they do not wish you well. They are going to attack you. And as you continue to tentatively walk forward, your heart is full of fear. Your heart is full of anxiety. You don't know whether to run or to stand still or to keep on walking and brazen it out. And as they walk towards you, they seem to be getting more aggressive, more confident because of their number. And then suddenly a look of horror appears on their face and they turn around as quickly as they possibly can and begin to run down the street in the opposite direction. And there's a sort of bravado that rises up in your heart, and you want to sort of, go and let that be a lesson to you and begin to actually, as if it was something to do with you. And at that moment you turn around, and standing behind you is the biggest, most muscular, most aggressive person you have ever seen in your life. They tower over you and they are there looking at the people who are running down the road, and they have appeared as your rescuer to protect you. And in that moment you suddenly realize that actually your anxiety fled, not because of anything that you had done, not because you were in a safe place now, but because something someone else had done. It was their power, it was their strength that was actually supporting and encouraging you. Now that's what we should be looking at. We should be recognizing the fact that in the spiritual realm, that's true of us every single day. Whilst we face an invisible foe, we do not face them alone. We face them with Jesus, a 12-foot man-mountain Jesus standing behind us every single day. So even though we may be walking through the valley of the shadow of death, even though we may be filled with anxiety, even though we may be filled with uncertainty as regards to the future, we need to stand firm on this one solid fact. We need to stay close to the one who loves us best and will protect us most, and we need to stay strong. So that's the first thing that he says here, and I hope you find it helpful. I wonder, do you feel close to God at this time? What are you doing to draw nearer to him? As you find yourself at home and a bit stuck and twiddling your thumbs, isn't this the perfect opportunity to read your Bible more, to pray more? We're putting online over the next week or so all sorts of different resources that will help to encourage you to get into groups, to be able to talk to people, to share the Bible together. One of the things I'm planning at the moment is that midweek, next week hopefully, I'll let you know, we will be starting a Bible study group, but we will be starting it online. We've got a piece of software as a church called Zoom, and I will be inviting you to join a group on a Wednesday, I'm guessing, and just begin to study this book of Ephesians together. It should be an interesting experience, and I hope that you'll consider joining us in that. But we're also looking to put other things in place. We're looking to put in place a YouVersion Bible study group, and we'll tell you a bit more about that later. I'm going to ask Kath if she can run an online prayer meeting, and just ways that we might be able to encourage one another to stay close and to stand strong. Paul tells us here that when we do, Jesus will strengthen us with his mighty power. And in other places in the epistle, he tells us that that power is the same power that raised Jesus from the dead. This is might, this is power, this is confidence, and this is something that we need to lay hold on. So that's the first thing. Stay close, stay strong. The second thing is this: stand firm, stand strong. And this is so important to the Apostle Paul that he actually says it twice. He says it in verse 11 and he says it in verse 13. He says, put on the full armour of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's invisible schemes. And then in verse 13 he says, therefore put on the full armour of God so that when the day of evil comes, this is the day of evil, you may be able to stand your ground, and having done everything, to stand. You see, his concern is that we stand our ground, that we aren't shifted, that we aren't put onto the back foot, that we aren't made to feel anxious and uncertain. The more we are together, even when we are physically distanced from one another, the better we will be. There's strength in numbers. There's strength in community. There's a sense of being part of something bigger than ourselves. And so online is going to become really important. The phone is going to become really important. You talking to others and helping them by talking, sharing with them is going to be really important to our sense of well-being. So I want to encourage you to do just that. I want to ask you to foster a sense of community. You can't just leave it to me to do it or to the deacons to do it, because actually we cannot do enough. It is something that we have to do together. We cannot do it for you. Ask yourself, who can I phone? How can I help? And then, and this is key, do it. Do it. Here, Paul is talking about doing down the devil. We don't talk about the devil very much, do we? He says, clothe yourselves in God's armour and stand on what you know of him. I love that image. You know, when I get out of bed in the morning and I'm walking around the house, it's always still a bit cold, and I put on my dressing gown. Maybe when you get home at the end of the day, you take off your work clothes or your day clothes and you get into your onesie or your cuddlies of some description, things that make you feel at home. And that's what he's describing here. He's talking about armour, he's talking about protection, he's talking about something that will enable us to be able to stand, but he's also talking about proximity, isn't he? And that's really important. The image that I have to say always comes to mind when I read these verses is the image of the sumo wrestler. You know, one of those big Japanese guys who sets his feet and challenges his opposition to move him from that spot. And that's how we must be. Do not let fear move you from faith. Do not let self move you from service. Over this past week, we've heard about people who have been selfishly grabbing off the shelves of the bizarrest things. I mean, this particular virus does not cause you to need copious amounts of toilet paper, and yet people seem to feel the need to stockpile toilet paper. I mean, honestly, there was a lady in tears on the radio and just this past week, and she was saying she is frightened that there is not going to be enough food on the shelves to be able to feed her family because people are being so selfish. We need to resist the urge to protect ourselves and seek to serve others. That at its heart is what Christianity is all about. We need to not let staying at home isolate us from others. You know, there's never been more opportunity to remain connected in other ways. We've got to use them and use them effectively. Not to share trivial pictures of the coffee we're drinking and things like that, but to start using this technology for really important purposes. I guess the bottom line here is this: be Jesus. Put on his presence and let him put you on. And then no matter what we face together, and the word is together, we will face it and be victorious. Hope you found this helpful and it's inspired you and got you thinking, and I look forward to connecting with you and communicating with you in the coming week. Thanks for watching.